I have unleashed a curse upon this world. It was on the 15th day of September when I took that fateful plunge. Though a storm approached, with coin in hand, I was able to convince the town's boatman, of whose name I shall not utter, to take me out to the sunken ruins in Cove. There is not much to describe of this boatman, except for the missing ring finger on his left hand. Stepping aboard the small boat, my precious belongings almost gave way as the boat tipped dramatically. I caught myself just as the engine began to sputter. As we passed the first dilapidated structure, I felt a cold drop of rain on my skin. Before the storm hit and I couldn't see what I was doing, I shouted to the boatman to stop. The engine ceased and a chill ran through my spine as not a sound was heard. Our small boat creaked as I suited up and groaned as I opened the long box I brought with me. Amazement, then fear, shone in the boatman's face as the glow of the spear I revealed glimmered in his eyes. Without a word and only a glance of apprehension from the boatman, I slid off the boat and into the water. The black void was beneath me. I didn't even have the moonlight to guide my way. The faint glow of my spear was my only solace. Silence was broken when the rain came, and silence resumed when I dove below the surface. Being underwater in an endless abyss can turn one's stomach over, but after the initial fright, there's a peacefulness that begins. I was swept in that peacefulness as I dove deeper, and my task enraptured my thoughts. I must bring it back. In the lush jungles of South America, my expedition began. As an archaeologist, I was not new to discovering odd and adorned relics, but in that ancient tomb, this mad king had clearly found or taken something which did not belong to him. The spear that was enshrouded within his coffin glowed just as brightly as it ever did, seemingly as if it was a weapon lost in time. After much research, I concluded that this weapon was belonged to a small region on the coast of England where the old kings reside. Many months later, I found myself in Cove, aboard a small creaky boat with a boatman missing a ring finger. I must bring it back, I thought again. The whispers in my mind were broken when I felt a wave against me, and a school of fish swam by. Typically, this would be a beautiful sight, but in those murky depths, I was constantly imagining what else could be swimming with me. My spear suddenly illuminated something before me. The misshapen and weathered face of some ancient tyrant stood heroically before me on his pedestal of eternity. Algae and moss consumed him, but left his resentful stare intact. Further I swam and further I went into that ancient city. I must bring it back, consumed my thoughts again, more intensely, almost as if guiding me to where I needed to be. The more my thoughts assured me that this is what I needed to do, the more I began to doubt myself. Was this journey admirable or insane? What if I did find the home of the spear? What then? There was no one waiting for me back. I saw in the distance what looked to be a gateway to a large shrine, pressed against a cliff. The only reason it became apparent in that black void is because it suddenly illuminated, momentarily blinding me. I felt another wave push against me, and I felt a considerable presence before me. At this moment, the glowing spear began to reverberate at a frequency which matched the noise emitting from the behemoth towering over me. A whale in this cove? No. Never have I heard of a whale with this sort of exoskeleton. Steadily swimming in place, the whale seemed to pose no threat to me, so I swam closer. My nerves began to rise as I was now within arm's reach. On closer observation, this exoskeleton seemed to be inscribed with some sort of ancient runes. It was like no language I had ever seen or heard of before. Excitement rose within me as I pondered the ancient history of this fascinating creature, but my fascination was quelled as the mammoth of a beast swam by, revealing yet again the illuminated gate. That foreboding gate may have been some impenetrable wall in the past, but seeing as I could swim up through a cracked hole, I made easy work of it. I made my way through the main hall, and although dark, I was able to make out paintings on the wall from the glow of my spear. Those same runes from the whale adorn these walls. Was the whale a protector of sorts? While my thoughts continued to preoccupy my mind, I suddenly slammed into the wall in front of me. I looked around, an empty room. I began to panic, considering that this might be the end of my journey. No, there had to be more. Upon a closer look, I found a series of stones in the ground that were slightly elevated. Anyone could have missed this, as the plant life of the cove almost completely obfuscated the ground. Lightly, I pressed one, blinked, and felt an incredible pain in my left shoulder. A murky red clouded my goggles momentarily, and when my senses came to, I realized I had been clipped by something. A lone arrow innocently laid on the ground near the wall in front of me. I quickly spun around to notice a small hole in the wall. I needed to be more careful. If this had been ages past and I was standing and not swimming low to the ground on that spot, I would not be here to tell this tale. I swam around the room further, closely investigating each wall, and then noticed something peculiar. A strange circular glyph appeared and glowed above my head. When I moved the spear, it disappeared. This was the answer. The glyph mirrored the elevated stones, with each symbol encapsulating a tally mark numbered 1 through 5. Cautiously, and as low to the ground as I could be, I pressed the first stone. Nothing. I continued with the sequence and began to feel a rumble in the water. The wall before me began to open up. Old and fatigued mechanisms inside the door's frame stuttered and creaked, finally coming to a halt before the entire door could open. Thankfully, it was just wide enough for me to swim through. A grand set of stairs faced me. After swimming for what felt like an eternity, I finally saw a light. My head breached the surface and I immediately removed my regulator, taking in my first breath of fresh air since being with the boatman. Removing my goggles, my eyes needed to adjust as the room was lit rather well for having been lost to history for so many centuries. A beautiful ray of moonlight shone through a crack in the ceiling to the center of this large room, and the edges of the room were lit by numerous torches. Large, tomb-like crypts encircled an altar of sorts at the forefront. From where I stood, I could just make out the large symbols atop the crypts, each one different from the last. A harrowing thought seared into my mind. Could someone be living down here? There was no way. In a meek and frail voice, I called out to my imagined denizen, but only my echo greeted me. My fins slapped against the wet stonework as I continued on, making magnificently revolting melodies in that quiet room. I approached the first crypt, staring in wonder and awe at the idea of what could lie beneath the lid. My hand gently grazed the stonework, and I quickly pulled back, feeling a sudden harsh vibration from the spear. What was it warning me of? I turned my attention to the altar at the front. A large pedestal stood behind, with a large depression in the exact shape of the spear. I must bring it back. Mesmerized by my findings, I slowly walked towards the pedestal. With each step I took, the spear vibrated at a stronger frequency. It didn't bother me. I must bring it back. Lifting the spear, I placed it into the depression. I must bring it back. The room shook. I must bring it back. I stared for a moment at my accomplishment. I must bring it back. I turned around. Staring at me, in the sickly green glow of the spear, was an apparition of one of the old mad kings. Its wispy hair almost caressed my face as we stared into each other's lost eyes. Before each of the crypts stood the rest of them, solemn in face and mad in heart. A final chill ran through me as I blinked, and they were gone. With only my memory and less than half a tank of oxygen to guide me through those dark waters, I somehow made it back to the surface of the cove. The rain had stopped and the boatman awaited me. Past the boatman, I saw something, a mirage of sorts. It was as if the rain somehow continued in the distance and silhouetted the form of something large. That same ghastly green glow surrounded the something. I sighed, got in the boat, and turned away. I don't know what I had unleashed down in that forgotten temple, but I did know that although at that moment the rain had stopped, a new storm was headed our way. What's going on, guys? If you made it this far, thank you so much for sticking around with me to the end. It really means a lot. This was obviously a very different experiment for me. I've been really wanting to practice my writing, and this was a good opportunity for me to just play around with something a little bit different, a little bit outside my comfort zone, and just overall do something fun. So if you've enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments, and I'll make more of these. If you didn't know, I worked on this actually for our Discord monthly challenge. You can find our Discord in the description, but every month we do a different challenge based off a subtle prompt that I make. And yeah, this might be a good opportunity for you guys too to come up with some cool pieces. So again, thanks so much for watching this, and until next time, keep on crushing it and keep on painting. See you guys.